Hi there, Year 8. It's Miss Moore here, and we are on lesson 54. This lesson is called Centre of Mass. So write down your title, write down your date, and let's see what we are going to do today. As you saw in the beginning picture, there was a guy rather scarily balanced on top of a building, on top of a table, on top of some chairs, which, I don't recommend doing. Please don't do that. But let's think about how good is your balance. You can see here someone balancing particularly well on their chair. Again, please don't do this at home, and don't do it in school either. And whoever's got cats might recognise their cat doing something like this. Mine's too lazy, but some cats like to sit on the top of doors like that. A very good balancing there. How good is your balance? Do you think you could achieve the feats that these guys are showing? We've got one guy balancing on the shoulders of another, and someone here balancing just two legs of a chair on the back of a bench. I want you to start thinking about how are they able to achieve such balance and such stability on only a small point of the object. How are they doing that? Here is part of the explanation. So we're looking at centre of mass today, and if you look down on the diagram of this stool tipping over, there's a red point here that's centre of mass. Now this centre of mass for the stool tends to fall right in the middle of the stool. It doesn't even matter that there's no metal there, there's no wood there. We're not looking at the seat or the legs, we're looking right in the middle, but that's the centre of mass of that stool. If the stool's flat on the ground, the centre of mass is above the ground. No problem, it's not going to fall over, it's not going to go anywhere. If the stool starts to tip, if we're looking at the second picture, but the centre of mass is still between the legs there, no problem, it's not going anywhere. But the third picture, where someone has been a bit silly and they've really tipped the stool over way too far, the centre of mass is now beyond the leg of the stool, and that stool is going to fall over because the centre of mass dictates how stable something is. So now we need to understand, what is centre of mass? How do we define it? Centre of mass of an object, as we just saw in the stool, centre of mass is the point at which the mass of an object is thought to be concentrated. So every object has mass, but where is that mass most concentrated? That is the centre of mass. Here's an example. We've got some symmetrical shapes here. We've got a square, a rectangle, a circle, a triangle. Where would you think that the centre of mass is for these shapes? Have a little think about it. If you were to draw the shape out, how could you mark out where the centre of mass is? If you are thinking that the centre of mass is going to tend to be in the middle of these objects, you're right. So here's how we can actually show where the centre of mass is. So for a symmetrical object, to find the centre of mass, you can draw some lines going across the object, and wherever those lines cross is the centre of mass. That only works for symmetrical objects, but draw out those shapes in your book and draw some lines through the middle until you find that they cross, and that is your centre of mass. So draw that in your book now as some notes to remind you of what this means. So the question we could start asking you, especially if you were a designer, an engineer, an architect, is how could you design objects to make them stable? Let's say you've got a task to create a vehicle that can go fast and can go round corners really quickly without tipping over. Think about the type of vehicle that you would design that can do that. Do you want to be in a school bus? How would you like it if you were at the top of the school bus and the driver decides to take the corner very, very quickly? What do you imagine would happen? So just think in your head. You can draw it out if you like, but think in your head, if you can, what sort of vehicle would you design that can be fast and can go round corners really quickly? You probably thought of something a bit like a race car, probably something quite low and something quite wide on the ground. The reason for that is because when you draw your lines of symmetry for a regular object, all the lines are going to cross at one point. So if you were going to draw lines of symmetry on the bus at the top of this picture, you'd find that the point in the middle would be kind of in the middle of the bus, but quite high up off the ground. If that bus was shorter, the centre of mass would be lower. What happens is that objects are going to balance under the centre of mass point. So stability depends on two things. It depends on the width of the base of an object, and that can apply to us as well. So I'm sure that if you've ever been standing on a moving bus or a train or a tube and you felt yourself going a little bit off balance, what you've probably done is move your feet a little bit further apart. That's because you're giving yourself a wider base and you're making yourself more stable. It also depends on the height of the centre of mass. So if you were going to be in a bus that was going to have to take a corner quickly, you'd probably rather be in a single-storey bus as opposed to a double or a triple-decker bus, because those are the ones that would be more likely to tip over because they've got a higher centre of mass. Now I'd like you to have a look at this video's description, because there's a link in the description that will send you to a very famous scene from a very famous film, The Italian Job, which demonstrates how the centre of mass and how an object will balance at the point of its centre of mass. Just open the video in a new tab and then watch it quickly and then come back to this video, because then we are going to do something with centre of mass. You guys are going to create something. We are now going to create our very own balancing birds. For this, watch the video coming up next and get out your activity packs, because in your activity pack you have a sheet that says balancing bird toy. So find that and keep watching to find out how to make it. Hello Year 8, we are going to make a balancing bird toy for our lesson on centre of mass. So what you're going to need for this is your cutout that was sent to you in your activity pack. So you should have one of these sheets. If you've lost it, you can Google balancing bird toy. This should come up under some of the results, and you can print one of these off if you've got a printer at home. But we did send everyone one of these. You're going to need some tape, some glue, 2 pennies, a toothpick, and some colouring pencils. First step, step 1, do any colouring you want to do. So I'm going to colour in my bird. And once you have coloured in your bird, so do any colouring that you want to. I would love to see your designs, because I think you guys will come up with some really amazing creative designs. Once you've coloured in your bird, the next step is to cut out the bird and its tail. So let's do that. Once you've done your colouring, your next step is to cut around your bird so that you've just got the bird and the tail. And you have to make sure that you're cutting into these lines here, wherever the wings go into the body. So these lines and these lines here. So make sure you cut those too. The next step is to fold your bird in half. So the easiest way to do this is flip it over and put wing to wing and fold it in half that way. After you've folded it in half, you are going to be applying glue to the forward part of the bird's head, so kind of the eye and the beak area, so like a thin line here and a thin line on the other side, because we are going to be folding it in half and sticking the bird's head together. If that is a bit flimsy, you can do it with a little bit of tape. I'm going to try it with some glue now and see if it sticks. So you should have something that looks like this at the moment, and then what you're going to be doing, we're now on step 5 of the sheet, is folding a line along the wings just to stiffen them, to make them a little bit firmer. So along this line here roughly, I'm going to just do a gentle fold, not a really big one, a gentle fold just to make sure that these wings are nice and strong. I'm going to do that now. Okay, what I've done is I've done just a gentle fold kind of roughly along where between the pink and the blue.
You can just about see the fold there. That seems to have worked pretty well. Like those wings are feeling pretty strong. The next thing is to tape the toothpick, so your toothpick you need now, to the underside of the wings across the centre. So you want your bird the other way around, like you're doing surgery on the poor bird. Sorry, bird, but this is also that you can fly. And you're going to get your toothpick and tape it in between. This is hard to do with one hand, guys. Tape it in between the wings here. What we're doing is reinforcing the structure of the bird here to make it strong. So I'm going to get my tape. I'm going to tape a little bit to one side, a little bit to the other side, and make sure that this toothpick stays where it should do. My bird now looks a little bit like this. We've got a toothpick taped in the centre here. Next thing we want to do is flip your bird over. You're going to cut in these bits here because that is where the tail is going to go. So little cut here, and then insert the tail so that it's got something to help it balance. It's all about balancing, all about centre of mass. So there's the tail on. You want the middle bit on the top, and then underside, just a little bit of tape securing it. Now, as I was taping it, mine actually moved a little bit, so mine's a bit off centre. So it's going to be quite interesting to see if the bird balances with that. So just, note, be careful when you're taping your tail on, because it can go a little bit wonky. Next step, you want your pennies, you want your tape, and what you're going to do is you're going to tape a penny to each underside of the tip of the wing here. So I'm going to position my pennies as far down as I can, like that, and I'm going to tape those pennies on. And what they're going to do is they're going to provide like a counterweight, because what we want is for all of the mass of the bird to be centered in this point here. That's why it's the center of mass. So we're going to tape those pennies on. Now, what might be an idea is to stick the pennies on with only a little bit of tape at first to then see if it balances, because if it doesn't, your job is to arrange the pennies so that it balances quite well. So this is the moment of truth. I've stuck my pennies on. I didn't really check the balance, so let's see if this works. And what should happen is that the bird should balance on the end of my finger. So I'm going to take my bird. Oh, and its wings are... The pennies are too heavy. Take my bird, I'm going to put the beak right on my finger there, and it is a balancing bird. Look at that. That has worked rather well, so I can actually move it around and it is not falling anywhere because the centre of mass is on its beak, on my finger. If I were to redo that, I might make some slight adjustments to make it balance just a little bit more. I think it's a little bit, I don't know if we can see, it's kind of leaning to one side, but it balances on my finger. So please have a go. Send me a picture of your finished product, please. I want to see beautiful, colourful designs. Is it going to be a tropical bird? Is it going to be, a shy bird that doesn't have bright colours? And then a picture of it balancing on your finger if you manage to do it. So that's your challenge. Can you make a balancing bird? Have a go.
And that is the end of your science lesson, Year 8. Really well done. Please remember that the centre of mass of an object is where its mass is most concentrated, and objects will balance on above their centre of mass. Head to Show My Homework for a quick quiz on today's lesson, and very, very well done.